Hello, students. In this module, we'll be exploring the artistic use, techniques, and possibilities of editing and sound, and how they serve to enhance a film as a whole. This lecture supplements your readings on these film elements in chapters 3 and 4 of your Understanding Movies text. Some of the film's references I will be citing you will be responsible for viewing and are embedded in the module, so as to prepare you to complete the discussion on your viewing of A Clockwork Orange by Stanley Kubrick, and your film critique on Strangers on a Train by Alfred Hitchcock, as well as to help you for the quiz at the end of the unit. I encourage you to watch some of the other films mentioned in this lecture and those in your text for your enjoyment and at your leisure, so as to reinforce your understanding of the film elements under study. So let's discuss editing. Editing in the earliest dramatic and narrative films were virtually photographed stage plays, as in A Trip to the Moon. The camera simply recorded action on a set from a stationary position as actors moved in and out of the frame. They were a series of master shots, as if the viewer were watching a play in which each player's movements were filmed in their entirety, presenting action in real time and real distance. This technique soon became a bit dull, and it was discovered that when actions were broken up into small scenes and then edited together to create sequences of greater vitality and versatility, resulting in a more exciting reality, so the art of editing was born. The editor's work generally begins after the shooting of the film, and the editor works with the director to cut and connect sequences of scenes and shots together for a functional reason: to tell a story, to develop character, to provide exposition and orientation, to develop mood and atmosphere, to provide humor, suspense, terror. Some of the fundamental concerns of cinematic editing include a focus on continuity. This concerns the logical flow for narrative editing from scene to scene and within a scene in most dramatic films, because the viewer must be oriented at all times so as to be able to follow the story, suspend their disbelief, and be immersed in it. Breaks in continuity may likewise result in breaks in credibility. A traditional use of editing in a sequence concerning continuity may begin with a long shot to establish the player and the setting, followed by a medium shot to introduce and present the player doing something that reveals their character, followed by a close-up to give a more intimate look at the player's face and emotional state, and then once more a long shot to introduce a new player into the dramatic action. Likewise, motivation is very important for a change of scene. If a person turns to look at something and the next thing we should see is what she is looking at, if what she sees is frightening, beautiful, shocking, the next shot should be a reaction on her part, shown through her actions and expressions. Each edit should be motivated by what preceded it, visually, logically, and emotionally, unless the intent is to create shock or disorientation or the totally unexpected. The scene in The Graduate, where Benjamin is seen moving from hotel bed with Mrs. Robinson to his backyard pool and flotation raft, cross-cutting back and forth from these two locales, ends with an abrupt cut from Ben diving into the pool and jumping onto the raft that, through quick cutting, becomes Mrs. Robinson, with Ben jumping on her in the hotel bed. The connection between plastic raft and the emotional investment in the hotel liaisons is clear. Time and distance is also an important factor. Real time and cinematic time are often very different. Real time presents a full-length visual record of an event that requires as long to watch as the event took to occur. Real time is primarily used in dialogue scenes, but may indeed be the temporal frame of an entire film, or an attempt at it, as in Zinnemann's High Noon, or Alfred Hitchcock's Rope. In cinematic time, hours, days, months can be compressed into minutes, and what matters is that viewers are shown the significant and dramatic aspects of an event only long enough to establish the scene and action. Elliptical cuts are edits that switch in time, wherein several different time frames may be cut back and forth, as in a flashback from the present to the past or a flash forward to the future. Or within a sequence where we see a man leave his office to go home, turns off the office lights, closes the door, edit, to a man opening the door to his home. We have jumped over all the intermediary time, office travel to home. Jump cuts like these can be used in various ways, and you may want to explore some of the French New Wave directors, such as Godard in Breathless, as a great example of the jump cut. Editing between distances, where the action is occurring at the same time, often known as parallel editing, can include cuts back and forth from various locales, sets, etc., and is known as a cross-cut editing. As for example, in a sequence where we cut from the interior of a cabin wherein a group of desperate settlers is being besieged by a villainous gang trying to get in. We cut to the outside of the cabin, focusing on the villains, to the group of rescuers who are on their way to help the poor settlers in the cabin. The shot sequence might go interior shot of settlers, exterior of villains, back to settlers, out to rescuers, galloping on the way to villains, to settlers, and so on. These are edits in space, and the distance between them is understood by viewers and accepted. The rhythm of these crosscuts creates, for the most part, the suspense. Consider a film you will be reviewing, Strangers on a Train, and the cross-cut editing sequence from tennis court to gutter, and how it creates suspense and informs character. Remember that editing in time is elliptical, while editing in space is cross-cut editing. Tempo is controlled by how long a particular shot or series of shots are held on the screen, and the speed at which these edits are presented. In regard to individual shots, the longer the shot is held, the slower, more relaxed the tempo. The shorter the shot, the more frenetic or hurried or exciting. Suspense can be created simply by use of tempo, building from long-held shots and moving to shorter shots with more edits, and ultimately to a crescendo of very brief shots containing lots of action. A virtual kaleidoscope of images can create a very dramatic climax to a film. Likewise, a shot of long duration can create tension, as the viewer is often conditioned to see it change after a few seconds. The content of the scene often determines its tempo. Intimate moments are rendered in long moments, while action sequences might have many cuts in quick, vibrant movements and rapid succession. The tempo may create and underscore the entire feel and theme of the film, as in films that attempt to capture a sophisticated boredom or the sense of timelessness in space, as in Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, where shots, single shots, last for long periods of time with few cuts to sudden abrupt cuts to other scenes somewhat jarring us from our stupor. Let's take a moment to discuss montage editing. Montage is a technique of film editing that combines a series of short shots or clips into one sequence, often set to music. The word montage is French for assembly or editing. Soviet montage theory is a more creative approach to constructing montages and popularized by filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein. After the 1917 Russian Revolution, filmmakers began experimenting with different creative editing techniques. Eisenstein, who started making films in the early 1920s, demonstrated the significance of individual frames in his montage editing. Rather than simply cutting together a series of independent shots, he took a more layered approach to the art form. Watch the Odessa Steps sequence in the overview. Eisenstein didn't invent the film montage, but he did elevate and change the way directors use the techniques. Eisenstein played with shot length, movement, and cuts to emotionally affect audiences. Watch the shower scene from Psycho to see Eisenstein's influence on Hitchcock, also in the overview. Montage sequences often imply the passage of time or multiple simultaneous events and are a vehicle to present the audience with a lot of information at once. These sequences can be used to evoke a range of emotions. For example, in a romantic comedy, a montage can show a sense of growing love or attraction. In a sports movie, a montage can show an athlete training for a big game and heighten suspense or tension about the outcome, as in Rocky training in Rocky. Or in a horror movie, a montage can show the main characters preparing to defend their home against a killer or supernatural force. A montage may use a variety of film techniques, including quick cuts. Typically, movie montages feature numerous shots cut together in quick succession, This allows time to pass, the story to advance, but without leaving the audience behind, or to create a sense of violence with its quick, jagged, slicing sequencing of a single action or event, as in the Odessa Steps sequence. No dialogue. This isn't a hard and fast rule, but many montages adopt the show don't tell philosophy. Voiceover narration. A skillful voiceover can clearly and artfully convey important information to the audience. A disembodied voice may narrate what's happening during a montage, providing more context, as in many Martin Scorsese films. Lastly, music is often an aspect of montages, and they use music to underscore the action that is unfolding quickly and the emotions the characters are experiencing. Another form of editing is the visual metaphor. Sometimes editing plays on the association viewers have with objects. Cutting away from one subject to another can create a number of visual comments. For example, a director might cut from a shot of an overly proud, conceited man to a peacock, one image commenting on the other as a visual simile or metaphor. A film editor has to take all this and so much more into account. Player performance, timing of cuts, cutting on movement, and of course, cutting on or with sound. Let's talk a little bit about sound. Though we might think of film as an essentially visual experience, we really cannot afford to underestimate the importance of film sound. A meaningful soundtrack is often as complicated as the image on the screen. The entire soundtrack is comprised of three essential ingredients: the human voice, sound effects, and music. These three tracks must be mixed and balanced so as to produce the necessary emphases, which in turn create desired effects. With the human voice, often in dialogue authenticates the speaker as an individual or a real person, rather than the imaginary creation of a writer. As is the case with a stage drama, dialogue serves to tell the story and expresses feelings and motivations of characters as well. Often with film characterization, the audience perceives little or no difference between the actor and the character. Thus, for example, Humphrey Bogart is Rick Blaine from Casablanca, or Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones, and so on, as film personality and life personality sometimes seem to merge. Perhaps this is the case because of the very texture of a performer's voice and delivery, and supplies an element of character. When voice texture fits the performer's face, stature, and gestures, a whole and very realistic persona emerges. When the talkies came in 1927, many a film star was lost due to the public's view of the silent star's persona and the incongruity of his voice, as with John Gilbert and many others. Yet, with the advent of sound and talking pictures, new, realistic, unique, distinct voices that could speak in the slang and idiom of the average person were sought and came to the fore. Consider especially the distinct voices of the Warner Brothers: James Cagney, Humphrey Bogart, Peter Lorre, Bette Davis, and so many more. It's interesting to note that dialogue is used, and it's very interesting to note how much dialogue is used and the quality. And the uses of dialogue vary from film to film. For example, in the film 2001, very little dialogue was evident, and most of what was used was not really essential or central to the movie. In this way, Kubrick was able to portray the inadequacy of human responses when confronted with the visual beauties and awesome, deafening silence of the universe. The comedy Bringing Up Baby by Howard Hawks, on the other hand, presents practically non-stop, overlapping dialogue, delivered at a pedal-to-the-metal speed. This use of dialogue underscores not only the dizzy quality of the characters played by Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant, but also the absurd lack of communication in the film itself. The audience is caught up in successive escapades and injected in one conversation after another. There's no time for us to reflect or consider. Instead, like Cary Grant's hapless character, the audience is caught up in a whirlwind of activity, largely due to its frenetic dialogue. Sound can be synchronous or asynchronous. Synchronous sounds are those sounds which are synchronized or matched with what is viewed. For example, the film portrays a character playing the piano. The sounds of the piano are projected. Synchronous sounds contribute to the realism of film and also help to create a particular atmosphere. For example, the click of a door being opened may simply serve to convince the audience that the image portrayed is real, and the audience may only subconsciously note the expected sound. However, if the click of an opening door is part of an ominous action, such as a burglary, the sound mixer may call attention to the click with an increase in volume. This helps to engage the audience in a moment of suspense. Asynchronous sound effects are not matched with a visible source of the sound on screen. Such sounds are included so as to provide an appropriate emotional nuance, and they may also add to the realism of the film. For example, a filmmaker might opt to include the background sound of an ambulance's siren, while the foreground sound and image portrays an arguing couple. The asynchronous ambulance siren underscores the psychic hurt incurred in the argument. At the same time, the noise of the siren adds to the realism of the film by acknowledging the film's urban setting. Consider the asynchronous background sound of L trains in Brooklyn during the scene in The Godfather when Michael is getting the gun out of the bathroom to kill Sollozzo. We can hear the rising volume of the screeching trains as we watch the face of Michael, whose rising mental anxiety over the act is echoed by the rising volume of the train sound, culminating in a raucous cacophony of squealing steam brakes, gunshots, and with Nino Rota's elegiac score as a coda to the scene. Volume is another factor that's important in creating suspense, shock, turmoil, or serenity. How often have we seen a film in which a quiet moment is shattered by the shrill ring of a phone at a highly amplified volume? Likewise, fidelity refers to the extent to which the sound is faithful to the source, as we, the audience, conceive it. When we do become aware that sound is unfaithful to its source, that awareness is usually used for comic effect. Contrapuntal, parallel, and sound bridges. Contrapuntal sound is where the sounds or music used contrast with the film or movie clip that it has been inserted into. It's a sound that does not fit in with the events happening. For example, take the ballet scene of violence in A Clockwork Orange, played out to classical music by Rossini. Parallel sound matches the action made on screen and can also be called synchronous sound. A sound bridge is sound, music, dialogue, narration, running through two shots with a cut in between. Music and background music. Background music is used to add emotion and rhythm to a film, usually not meant to be noticeable. It often provides a tone or an emotional attitude towards a story and or the characters being depicted. In addition, the background music often foreshadows a change in mood. For example, dissonant music may be used in film to indicate an approaching but not yet visible menace or disaster. Background music may aid viewer understanding by linking scenes. For example, a particular musical theme associated with an individual character or situation may be repeated at various points in the film in order to remind the audience of central motifs or ideas. Lastly, woohoo! Sound can be diegetic or non-diegetic. Diegetic sound is sound occurring within the context of the story and able to be heard by the characters. In a scene, someone is playing a piano and we hear the tinkling of the music, as do the characters within the scene. Some common forms of diegetic sound include actors speaking to each other, as in dialogue, sounds originating from any object on the screen, like footsteps and police sirens, music that comes from a sound system or orchestra within the scene. Non-diegetic sound is said to be when its source is not present or implied in the narrative universe. Common instances are music or score used to augment emotions, actors' commentary or narration, any extra sound added for effect outside those that could emanate from objects or people in the scene. Film sound is comprised of conventions and innovations. We've come to expect an acceleration of music during car chases and creaky doors in horror films. Yet it's important to note as well that sound is often brilliantly conceived and that the effects of sound are often largely subtle and often are registered by only our subconscious minds. Yet it behooves us to foster an awareness of film sound as well as film space, so to truly appreciate this art form. There are many more creative and artistic uses of sound and numerous films that innovate and expand this element of filmmaking. Your textbook will cite many examples for you to consider, view, and listen to. Click on the links in this overview to watch some examples of creative editing and sound use in clips from Battleship Potemkin, the Odessa step scene, and Psycho, the shower scene. And watch the brief video Sound as Story, along with the comic use of sound clips in Jacques Tati's Mon Oncle, to gain more insight into the use of these important filmic elements. For further study, the film, Koyaanisqatsi, tough to say, is an experimental film in sound, motion, image, color, editing, etc. It is over an hour long, but it's worth the watch. See the effect and power that a wordless, actorless film can achieve simply through those aspects we have studied so far in Modules 1 and in Module 2. I hope you enjoy the films in this module and focus on the editing and sound qualities to truly appreciate the experience.